Hello and welcome. If you are watching this video, it means you must have purchased the Digital Art Junky sketch pack. So we're going to get into the breakdown of each of the brushes as well as the paper textures that come with the pack. To import your paper textures, come up to your Actions panel and click Insert a File. Locate the correct folder and select a paper texture. Make sure it covers your entire canvas. Then click the N next to the layer to select either linear burn, color burn, or multiply. What you select will be left up to personal preference. You can either test all three after you've created a piece and choose which looks best, or you can just select one to start. Just know if you choose multiply, make sure you duplicate the layer and all your work will be sandwiched in between those two multiply layers. Typically, if I'm inserting a paper texture before I start the piece, I always select linear burn. Make sure all of your work is done in layers below your paper texture layer. So let's break down our first set of brushes, the Rough Sketcher and the Silk Sketcher. Both of these are great for concept sketching early on in a piece. When you zoom in, you can see that the Rough Sketcher has a bit more speckling than the Silk Sketcher. And let's take a look at the different pressure settings. With a light touch, the lines become a little bit more translucent, and as you press down harder, they become darker and more opaque. You're going to see this trend a lot throughout the pack, where pressing down harder with your pencil is going to give you different effects. The best uses for these brushes is for early concept sketching in the beginning of a piece. These are your messiest stages of drawing. You'll find that the Silk Sketcher is a very similar brush to the Rough Sketcher. As you press down lightly, it's a more translucent line, and when you press down harder, it becomes darker. The difference is that the Silk Sketcher is a bit smoother of a line. It has less speckling in between the grains of the line. Again, these are great brushes for the early stages of a sketch. Our next category of brushes is going to be our realistic pencils. Now, I've designed these pencils to work like real pencils do. So let's take a look at what exactly that means. Off the bat, we see that this has a similar effect as the other sketching brushes, where if you press down lightly, it's more translucent, and when you press down harder, it's more opaque. The difference is with this pencil, you get different effects when you tilt the brush versus when you use the tip. By using the tip of the brush, you get a precise line, but as you tilt it to the side, you can get more of a shading type of line, just like you were tilting a regular number 2 pencil to the side. Here's another look at the difference between using the tip of the pencil versus tilting it. Again, the harder you press down with this pencil, the darker the line becomes. Even when it's tilted, that remains the same. Now let's take a look at the second realistic pencil. This pencil works the exact same as the first one, but this one has a lot more of a roughness to it that's more reminiscent to, say, a colored pencil on construction paper. You can really get a feel for that roughness of texture when you use the shading on the second realistic pencil. Compared to the first one, it's definitely a lot rougher and more texturized. The next brushes we're going to take a look at are the hatching brushes. First brush is a vertical hatching brush. The harder you press down with your pencil, the darker the lines will become. Now, the orientation of this hatching brush depends on the orientation of your canvas. For example, here my canvas is fit to the screen, and so the lines come out vertical. If I wanted to create some cross hatching, I can simply use my fingers and pinch to flip the direction of my canvas, and the lines will still be vertical, which will create this cross hatching pattern. Here's another example. If I want the hatching to be diagonal, I'm simply going to pinch the canvas and move it so that the canvas is now turned diagonally. Then if I want to create some cross hatching, I'll simply pinch it and move the canvas the opposite way. Now I have some diagonal cross hatching. Next up is our Smudged Hatching 1 brush. This brush has a bit of a messy feel to it, and the harder you press down with it, the darker the hatching will become. Our next brush is the second Smudged Hatching brush, and this has a bit of a messy feel to it, but it works differently than the other two brushes we've seen. This brush changes direction every time you lift it. Next we have the Abstract Stippling brush. This brush is what it sounds like. It's a stippling brush that is kind of different than your average one. It gives the appearance of pen on paper, but it looks like you made a million tiny little dots with your pencil. Keep in mind that the harder you press down with this pencil, the darker the lines will be. Next is our grainy color pencil. This gives off the look of a regular color pencil. When you press down lightly, you get a pretty translucent line, and as you press down harder, it becomes darker. When used in combination with the paper textures that come with the pack, it looks like a Crayola colored pencil, I'm telling you. By lightening up the pressure of your pencil, you can get a really soft gradient. Next up is the graphite stick. Now, if you're unfamiliar with traditional sketching tools, you might not know what this is. You can just think of it as a square pencil, like a square tipped pencil. Adding pressure to your pencil will result in a very dark line, but as you lighten it up, you can get a really soft gradient because it will be a lot lighter and more translucent. Now we have the shading brushes. Yay! I'm going to turn off the paper texture for this so you can really get a feel for the texture. All of these shading brushes work the same. When you press down hard, you get a lot more depth and a lot darker of a shading, and as you press down lightly, you get a beautiful, soft, translucent gradient. These brushes have a heck of a lot of texture and make shading while drawing super easy and not as time consuming as regular sketching. Okay, so our next brush is the basic charcoal brush. We're getting into the charcoal section now. When you press down hard with this line, you get a solid black, really thick brush, and when you press down lightly, you get a super thin, kind of translucent charcoal brush. The purpose of this is so that you can get a lot of depth in the areas you're shading, but still be able to soften the edges by just lightening up the pressure of your pencil. For example, I thought this line was a little too sharp, so I'm just running my pencil very softly along the edge. And now I'm able to achieve a soft charcoal look. Speaking of soft charcoal, our next brush is the soft charcoal brush. Now, this is a very buildable brush, okay? When you press down hard, you definitely get a lot of darkness, but it's not the same as the others. Here, you can build up depth by just running your brush softly across itself. And you can lighten up the pressure of your pencil in areas that you want to have an even softer bit of shading. This is like your charcoal shading brush. So next up is our light charcoal stick. So this is a fairly translucent brush and it's very buildable. When you press down lightly, it gets even more transparent. But the key with this one is to add a lot of depth by running it across itself, and then when you lighten up the pressure, you don't just get a lighter color, you also get a lot of texture. Next we have the pitch black charcoal, and this one's exactly what it sounds like. It's a pitch black piece of charcoal. No matter how much pressure you use, it's always going to be pitch black. So this is for areas where you want your charcoal to be the darkest. All right. So next one is the oil pastel brush. I'm very excited about this one. This one, when you press down hard, you lay down a lot of pigment, and as you lighten up pressure, it becomes a little lighter and a lot more texturized. What's cool about this one is it has oil built into it, just like a regular oil pastel, which means it's moldable. So when you are putting down pigment by pressing down hard, you can actually move it around and soften up the lines and blend it with other colors by just lightening up the pressure of your pencil before you lift it. So let's mix this blue with a little red. I'm barely running my brush across the middle part, and that's when I'm getting that beautiful soft blend. But as I press down harder, more of the red is coming through. Now, the thick pastel works in a very similar way. This is just a more texturized version of the brush beforehand. So, by pressing down hard, you lay down pigment. By pressing down lightly, you soften edges. You create beautiful blends. Let's take a look at what this one looks like when I mix it with a different color. Again, barely pressing down on the areas where you're getting that soft blend, and then pressing down really hard where the red is popping out. Okay, last up is our smudge sticks. Now, these are very interesting. These are not meant to be used as brushes, but they're meant to be used with the smudge tool. So, for instance, let's say I had laid down some charcoal and I think the lines are like way too hard. I'm going to come up to my smudge tool and select one of my smudge brushes. And then I'm going to be able to blend this out just like I was using a smudge stick on graphite in traditional sketching. Here it is again with the second smudge brush. Again, clicking on the smudge tool, not the pencil, I'm going to select my second smudge brush, and then I'm just going to blend it out and soften up these edges. the lighter you press, the lighter the smudging will be. Thank you guys so much for watching, and more important, thank you so much for being a customer. I appreciate you so much. I'm always here to help. If you ever have any questions, email me, DM me, leave a comment, whatever. I really appreciate you guys, and I hope y'all enjoy your brushes.